Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Star Citizen AA. This is Nikki Batgirl D'Angelo, and today I have another special guest from CIG. Today we're joined by David Haddock, the lead writer from CIG. Hello David, how are you today?
Good, how you doing?
Doing great. I really appreciate you coming on, so thank you very much up front because I think we're going to be doing this pretty quick.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So David, I start off the show pretty much, or I should say the interviews, with the same question to everybody. Could you remember the first computer that you owned, that you gamed on?
I do. It was a Epson Equity 2 that my mom bought because she was working for a computer science professor who had a deal with Epson. And I remember my brother and I were very upset because at the time everybody had Commodores and there were no games for PC. So it was very slim pickings when it came to stuff to buy and stuff to play. So yeah, I think my first game was King's Quest 2, and my brother's was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Infocom.
Oh, I remember those. So you're dating yourself with those a little bit, growing up in that era that Chris was actually producing games.
Yep. Yeah, I bought Wing Commander, and I remember selling, because I got a job at a Babbage's computer store. I remember selling Wing Commander 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's where I believe I bought 2 and 3. Well, no, I think I had to get them somewhere else because I had moved at the time, but I remember buying the first 2 there.
Yeah, I didn't have a computer fast enough to run 3, so I couldn't get it. So.
Yeah, Chris is evil that way, always making us buy new computers with every game.
Right.
Yeah. So what was the first game that you actually got addicted to? Or stuck to it?
I think I don't know, the one that it's probably a game by Maxis back in the day called a RoboSport, which was a turn-based robot tactical fighting game. So it was like guns and stuff, it was like burnt out arenas, but you could actually play it online. And so you could, but it was turn-based, so you would do your moves, the other player would do their moves, and then it would compile everything together. But there wasn't a single player to it, but it was like kind of amazing because you just never got bored of it because it was always a different, and the battles would always play out differently. And you could have different sized teams and different points to allocate and stuff like that. But I think I played that game until my computer literally couldn't run it. It just like it wouldn't even recognize the discs. It was just not.
Okay. So when back then, did you think that you were going to have a career in the game industry?
Not really. I mean, I played a lot of games, and at the time I wanted to do I wanted to be in the FBI, and then high school I segued over into movies, went into movies, and so then I was mostly movie focused for the bulk of it.
Okay. What career were you in before coming into the game industry and subsequently into CIG?
I worked in movies. Initially started out, I was a location sound mixer in New York on very, very low budget movies. When I moved out to LA, I did have a brief stint as a game tester at Activision, working the graveyard shift, while I was interning for Chris's production company during the day. And so then from that, I was a director's assistant on a movie called Outlander, and I was a PA, did behind the scenes videography, all sorts of whatever I could do to kind of keep myself valuable. I ended up doing. So it's mostly a lot of movie stuff, freelance stuff, before I started doing.
Oh, well, it's a lot of the work that you tell me that you did isn't really in the field of writing.
No.
Did you publish anything before coming to CIG, or?
Nope. I mean, I wrote screenplays pretty much in my free time. Anytime I wasn't working on a set, I would be trying to write scripts and get them out to people. And that was the primary reason why I moved to Los Angeles. Initially, in New York, I was just doing, like I said, I was doing sound crew stuff, and felt like I needed a change to focus try and focus more on writing. And New York is a great town if you're working on set, but a lot of the decision makers aren't there. So I was like, I'm going to try and go do a change of scenery and hopefully try and make some traction on writing. So, but yeah, it was up until this, basically, it was all nights, early mornings, weekends, working on the script.
Okay. What was the most memorable moment you had before coming to CIG in that career?
It was probably, actually, I would probably say it was on Outlander. There was when I first started working on it, we had basically 8 weeks of pre-production, like concepting, storyboarding, animatics, and stuff like that. And they had hired a team of concept artists, one of which was Brian Church, who's been working on this, and Ian McKay, and all sorts of people. Basically put everyone in a room with the director and the producers, and basically put them in an office and spent 8 weeks just drawing props, characters, costumes, storyboards, everything, and but plotting out the entire movie and using that as a way to raise funds to make the movie. And it was an amazing experience to be able to go into work every day and see these really smart and really talented people just brainstorming and coming up with cool stuff. So that was probably one of my favorite working experiences.
Okay, it sounds a lot like what you're doing today. Only a lot more hours, right? That kind of almost makes the next question a moot point, but what brought you to Cloud Imperium Games?
Well, like I said, I knew Chris just because I worked for him for, I was on that movie for 2.5 years. So I got to know Chris, I got to know the director, I got to know John Schimmel, who's also been helping out. And after that, I sort of decided I was going to try and take some time to focus on writing. So I was ended up talking with Chris about another possible film script, collaboration type thing. So we worked on that for a while, and it ended up falling apart just as scripts tend to do. But we worked on it for a couple months. But yeah, it was a good experience because we got to get the dialogue going and get to a very comfortable place where we could bounce ideas off of each other, and there was not like feelings hurt or whatever. If I presented something and you didn't like it, I wasn't going to take it personal and get angry and stuff like that. So hopefully, building like a good working rapport and understanding of the common language and stuff.
All right. So when Chris pitched the Star Citizen project to you, what was your first thought?
It was gnawing fear because I'd never done anything like this before, and I said such. It's a very different discipline, and a very unique discipline, because just by the interactivity alone adds a very weird aspect to designing a storyline. With movies, it's a one-way process. You kind of come up with something, and the audience is there for the ride. This is you're letting them participate, and you want them to feel like they're a part of it. And so it's a very, very different thing. So that was worrying for me personally, just because it was outside of my wheelhouse so much. But also the scope of how he was pitching it, and seeing the demo, and it was just, it was incredible to see. So
okay. So you came in after the actual first pitch at Gamescom back in 2012?
I came on the August, where we met the first time, I think it was August of 2010. Okay. And he had been building, it was an early prototype of the demo that he ended up debuting at Gamescom. But in that sort of early phase, we were he just had a very loose idea of kind of what he wanted to tackle. And it was more just the feeling that he wanted to capture. So okay. Initial conversations were these sort of very basic, what's the universe like, what's the setup, all these sorts of things. And that's what ended up leading to the time capsules, which started the September 10th before the month before the Gamescom thing. So
okay. So what can you explain to us your responsibilities, day-to-day responsibilities at CIG?
It's sort of a three-tiered. I like to think of it as a three-tiered approach. There's Squadron 42 stuff, which is working on script, developing characters, and writing dialogue, rewrites, trying to plot out. And we've agreed upon where the story is going, but once you get into the nuts and bolts of telling a story, it's always going to change stuff. So it's a lot of that. Plus, there's the persistent universe stuff, which is at the moment writing out system descriptions, planetary systems and descriptions, and stores, and all sorts of things. And plus, more macro, kind of broad scale things like what are phases of architecture? What are the banding societies look like? All these sorts of things are sort of on any given day kind of popping up as things that need to get done. And then there's the third part, which is sort of the community-based stuff. So the Spectrum dispatches, news updates, reviewing the Spectrum dispatch stuff that David Lettyman sends over, the Ask a Dev thread, all those sorts of things. So it's basically just kind of hopping like a madman between any of those three.
Right. You seem to be the most active one of the devs on the Ask a Dev thread. When I go out there and I look at it, sometimes 20 of the questions answered in a row are all yours.
Yeah, I'm desperately trying to keep ahead of the tide. Fortunately, I don't get slammed too much, so I tend to do it. I'll do a first pass when I get in the morning, and then when I'm working at lunch. But also at the same time, and I think I mentioned this on the thread, but I'm in a kind of unique position because a lot of this stuff, because we've had the writer's guide and the lore builders and time capsules and Spectrum dispatches and stuff, there's a lot of the information about the lore is already out there, so I just get to offer clarity. I don't have to worry about the same things that the designers have to worry about, which is they're building these systems and mechanics and stuff like that, and so they might not be in a position where they can really talk about it. So a lot of the stuff I get to talk about is already kind of out there in some form or another, and if it's not, then I just make up a glib excuse and
you gotta do what you gotta do. I've been quite impressed with the way that you have the community interacting with you, and with the way that the actual persistent universe, and to a lesser extent maybe Squadron 42, is moving. What first brought about your idea to incorporate the ideas, the stories, what the community had to offer you?
Well, I mean, that was part of that was it was mostly Chris. I mean, you wanted to keep the community involved, and it's a interesting process doing a game in this way. I mean, I always kind of fall back to the explanations like Star Wars came out, and then people could respond to Star Wars, but if Star Wars released all of their lore while they were making Star Wars, it would have been a very different process.
No Jar Jar Binks.
But yeah, it's also it's so big, and part of the fun about these things feeling really fleshed out and lived in is that they're kind of not coming from one person. Like, you want that variety, you want that sort of flavor that multiple people can bring to the process. Obviously within reason, you don't want things to get too crazy, but yeah, as you see every day on our site, the community is really creative, and there's a lot of smart people who know a lot of interesting things about different subjects and stuff like that. So it's kind of a waste not to take advantage of a resource like that.
Right. You brought up Star Wars, so I'm going to bring up something that worries a lot of us in the community. In the sci-fi genre, there are so many breaks in continuity of story, from the way it's presented in, say, a first film to the way it expands over time. With the player universe and Squadron 42 both being dynamic storylines, I mean, I'm assuming that, right? What things are you doing to keep the lore and to write canon, so continuity flows from one episode to another, without someone looking at it later on going, hey, this can't be because back in this, original episode that you wrote, you know what I'm...
Right, yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't know, it's tough. I mean, I think at a certain level you're going to run into that, but I think I don't know, to me, part of the fun thing, or the approach to it, is approaching things very broadly. Like, at the end of the day, the funny thing is, when I look back at like Kid Crimson and stuff like that, it's weirdly not specific about a lot of stuff. How jump points work, what kind of ships there are, what type of guns there are, all sorts of things that, when the game comes out, you could get a lot more specific about. But if you kind of keep the characters engaging and you keep the storylines engaging, the tech stuff, I feel like you don't necessarily need to put as much of an emphasis on. So I think part of it is just building a universe that can accept a lot of different types too. It's not the Evil Empire, Rebel Alliance thing. It's like there's a lot of versatility and a lot of and keeping the structure flexible. I think will hopefully allow us to explore a lot of different storylines in the future without feeling like that we're retconning a lot or breaking the continuity that we've established earlier on.
Right. See, I was impressed with Disney, how once they got the Star Wars franchise, how they got together that team of people that started going through all the different lore or canon and trying to weed through the things that were added incorrectly and keep the things that were, from the beginning. So right. that was impressive. And, I can see you doing something similar little by reading your thread, by reading the stuff that comes out, and by seeing the direction that Chris is moving everything in both his 10 for the Chairman and whenever he talks in one of his interviews. So I'm pretty solidly behind what you're doing. I think what I was looking for in that one was, in the end, it's got to be a game and it's got to be playable, and at some point you have to add more to it, right? And sometimes, yeah. What is the biggest challenge right now in creating this universe where you've got a time, you pretty much, when you're writing a book, you can write book after book after book and expand on it, right? But this is something that's going to go live in the next 18 to 24 months. And that puts a timeline. What is the biggest challenge you have in having that timeline and having such a vast universe to fill?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, again, it's leaving enough room for exploration, having what comes out when the game launches make sense and be cohesive, but have there be room for expansion. So it's not, we don't necessarily need to get into what are the personal dietary hygiene habits of the Banu, if we can get into that in 3 years,
right.
But still making sure that everything makes sense and connects, and the alliances make sense and the social structures make sense. I feel like it's leaving. We need to pick our battles in this sense. We got to figure out what's the heart of what needs to be told and set up, and then not ignore the other stuff, but just not illuminate on it, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does.
So I think that's going to be the big, because you're right. I mean, it's a lot to get done, and a lot of
1,000 systems, or is that 1,000 planets? It's like 1,000 systems with planets, and
it's not 1,000 systems.
It's not.
Luckily.
Yeah, luckily. Hey, 10 years down the road, you never know.
Right. I mean, yeah, it could be. But yeah, I think initially, I can't remember what the tally is. I think it's around
100, right?
Yeah, there was a stretch goal earlier on that expanded to 100.
I think it's 100, and then there's planets that bring it up to 6 or 7, right?
The planets make it a little trickier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe the original stretch goal was 100 or so.
I look at it like you've got, if you look at it like an onion, at the very center, you've got like the core. What's the game about, and what are we doing? And then the layers are you're building outwards. So you're building the core. I see that. How much are you going to incorporate feedback or lore that's written by other people other than CIG in the future. You've opened up the lore builders to us to give you input. Is there going to be a point that you open up something like that for us to help fill in the universe, like planetary lore and what groups might be there?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think the tricky thing, and I mean, the lore builder stuff has been good because also, like I said, I put I have a running Excel sheet with all of the pirates that people came up with in that thing. So it's a great just sort of grab bag of like, hey, we need a pirate to occupy the system. Just go and grab that one and throw in the music. The tricky thing is it's just because there are things behind the scenes that we have factored in that we can't comment on. It becomes tricky to kind of contextualize lore requests in a sense because we don't want to inadvertently kind of spoil anything because we still want it to be a fun game that you would get to experience. And that was sort of the intent behind the lore builder, was that it was not necessarily stuff that has a direct influence on game mechanics, so I could be a little bit more verbose in my explanation of what we needed. But I think it's a possibility. Again, there's some really talented people who are contributing to the site, so if we kind of find stuff that, and actually, I mean, OES, the sort of clandestine Secret Service spy agency was a fan created thing. So
okay,
I think a somewhat big part of the universe. So. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm throwing you some questions that weren't on our list. It's like, it's very, and now we're done with that one. It's just, I look at what you bring to Star Citizen and Squadron 42 as one of the most important elements, because when I played the Wing Commander games in the past, it was always that engaging storyline that brought us back over and over again. Right. So and this is this isn't a question to make you feel uneasy, but it's like you've got a lot of weight on your shoulders.
Oh no, totally, yeah.
Tell me
that.
How many people are in your? Does Chris tell you that every day?
No, my ulcers.
Okay, your ulcers. How many people are on your team working with you?
We're sort of in the process of expanding. But right now it's two. 2 people
writing everything.
So far, yeah. I mean, we're in the process of talking to some other people to start to fill out the team, but yeah, it's been well. I mean, obviously, the designers help, and Ben writes stuff for us,
yeah.
But yeah, sort of at the moment, there are 2 of us.
Okay. A couple more questions, and then I guess we can call it quits. You've had some great, I guess you could say, some fiction in the jump points. Has there been a plan on releasing that as a compilation inside of the store yet?
I'm not sure. I remember somebody had brought that up, but I'm not sure if it's where that is, if that's been decided upon, or if they're still discussing it. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, and in your last lore builder, you said that there's some new fiction coming out. Is it what we've been reading in the comlink, or is it something else that's coming out soon?
Well, we're trying to kind of backlog. So we, the Dateline one that we just started, and then we're actually working on building a couple more in the pipeline. So we have some kind of back-to-back serials coming out soon. So yeah, we have a host of writers that we're sort of talking to about serials as well as jump point stories, trying to build as much content as we can.
And these fictions are more to build the backstory, not to build the game themselves. Still, right?
Yes and no. Some of it is hinting at some kind of game mechanics stuff. I mean, obviously, a lot of the writers that we're contracting with are not as intimately familiar with the game and what's going on and stuff like that. So some of it is just more about telling entertaining stories in this universe. Some of it is alluding to more game stuff, and we're obviously not trying to do anything that directly conflicts with what the reality of the game is intended to be. And so that's why the designers will read and review fiction such as to make sure it's not directly clashing with it. So yes and no, I guess.
All right. So, it's like I've been reading the stories. I get Kazin and I guess a couple of others that allude to the Lynch fever, and I kind of read between the lines and go, game comes out that might have something going on there. Is that like something? Is that what you're alluding to, that some of these stories may have things that are going on in the universe?
Yes. Well, the news updates are a different beast. Yes, those are probably a bit more tied into the game. Sometimes, like there was a bounty hunter one about the Bounty Hunters Guild that we're having an internal discussion about how exclusive or elite we wanted the guild to be. And there were sort of two camps, and so we couldn't figure it out. So we ended up writing this post that was emulating the argument between members of the Bounty Hunter Guild, just to see how people would react to it and see which way the community was leaning. So some of that stuff is more likely, I think, to appear in the game, like Lynch's fever. Could be something that pops up. I would have to really talk to the designers about that, but yeah, hopefully it's the characters like the senators are the senators that are going to be in the Senate when barring anything happening to them when the game comes out. So it's definitely introducing characters, it's introducing setups and stuff like that. So yeah.
All right. And last question is about timeline. The stories and the lore that we've gotten to date, would that be things that are prior to the actual events that are to take place in Squadron 42? Or are they just totally not in that timeline at all?
I'm gonna invoke a no spoiler.
All right, no, that's fine. It's just that you're releasing lore, and if it's after Squadron 42, it's kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get you, but yeah, I'm gonna.
All right. You got it. You could do that. I'd rather not know ahead of time. I'm one of the people that I'm thankful that there's not going to be a real beta or alpha of Squadron 42 because I want it to unfold as I play. And that's what brought me into this. Well, that's the interview. I do have one question from a fan, but I'm kind of like embarrassed to ask it. He really was insisting that I ask if you guys would write me into the world as a reporter.
Oh, okay.
But I was like, that's cool. But, it's like us subscribers, we get something somewhere, so that would be cool.
All right.
Yeah.
That's something to consider.
Yeah, because I think I'm going to get my Drake information runner, and that's what I'm going to use for my reportership. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to talk to you again as time goes on. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, totally.
All right, David, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.